That's a provision for that kind of
That'd be
position.
fine with me. That'd be perfect.
I don't know why it comes out of the police department. That's all. It's maybe bookkeeping and accounting. So I guess the one thing we're left with on the basis of this discussion is some concern about whether the reserve wages need to be augmented that much for that number of hours. I think, unless I'm wrong, I think the Finance Committee would recommend a different number for the police department expense line altogether. Recognizing that within the police department expenses, you've got sub-accounts here that you've very helpfully enumerated. And I think once we decide upon a figure, that allows you to kind of transfer funds among those sub-accounts as needed. So I think that's the big issue for us. Well, my guess is that we're talking about...
What would the Finance Committee propose?
Well, if you make the adjustment as you just have for the stipend, instead of a stipend of $2,600, you're talking about
$1,350 savings.
$1,350 savings?
Yes.
I'm looking at the reserve wages and thinking that we would recommend against 5,000 of that. Something on that order of magnitude.
I beg your pardon?
Instead of spending another $5,800 for reserve wages, I would think we would not recommend 5,000 of that. In other words, for that line, he's talking about 34,000 reserve wages. We would say 29,000.
Jan was not with us last night, but Ricky was. The committee spent time. We wanted to hear the case for it. Personally speaking, I haven't heard the case for it. So the dollar amount is essentially the equivalent of 7 hours per week. We recommend a dollar equivalent of 7 hours a week reserve officer. We do not believe that there has been justification for this. And I suspect we probably, I'm not trying to put words in the mouths of my colleagues, but I suspect we'd be unanimous on this.
In other words, just keeping it 33 hours and then increasing it for the, for Diane's 8 weeks. Not jumping to 40 hours.
Don't everybody speak at once. 7 hours a week. What do we not get for that?
Well, the one issue I forgot to mention was the training, and I had spoken to that issue a few weeks ago, and the state has the mandatory 40 hours for full-time. I believe liability-wise we're within ourselves, but we don't require the same thing. I think as I mentioned, some of that can be absorbed at 40 hours because our officers work in more than one department. So we can split some of that up, but we're still going to be responsible for some of that training. So as a matter of fact, I had 2 officers go to emergency vehicle operating course training the other day. That was 5 hours each. They were there 8. They weren't going to put in for anything. I put them in for 5 hours. That benefits the town because our liability insurance really likes when we send our officers to emergency vehicle operating classes. So it's basically coming out of this hand and going into the other, but it's going to save you money. I mean, I spent 10 hours of salary sending these guys to this class, but it's going to help the town as far as liability because, God forbid, any of our guys get in an accident, especially the 2 that we sent. Having been to this course, it will help the town with their liability. So
we get a discount?
What's that?
We get a discount?
My understanding from MIIA is yes, we do. And we also have, there's a trailer they're going to be bringing in. Unfortunately, we can't get it till next year, but the fire department's availing themselves of it. And it's a simulator. And once again, that'll get everybody through that simulator, and it'll help us out with our liability insurance. So, I mean, I did say I was going to look for free training. The training was free. I just had to pay the officers to go. And put in for their full 8 hours, so. So training is an issue, and in light of what happened in Newtown, and I hate to beat my chest about this, but we need to get these guys qualifying a couple times a year, and that takes time, it takes money, so.
If I can ask a question, I see training as a separate category, but that's just the cost of tuition?
Yeah.
Whereas you're talking hours.
Exactly.
And how many hours is the training?
Well, like I said, there's the state mandates for full-time officers 40 hours each, so between 5 of us, that's 200 hours.
But for full-time officers?
Yeah, it's full-time is mandated, but what my point with this is, from a liability, if we don't send our guys for the 40 hours of training, we could be leaving ourselves wide open, because you get an attorney that comes up and says, how come full-time officers went for 40 hours, you only sent your guys for 2? How come you guys only qualify once here, everybody else qualifies twice? So I'm just trying to be proactive in protecting the town and the police department from liability by getting these guys as much training as they can. As I said, I can offset some of that because, for example, Charlie Wilder, he works for Conway and he works for Buffalo. So we can split that 40 hours 3 ways between the 3 of us, and it comes out to 12 hours each. 12 and a half.
Mr. Chairman.
Paulette, do you have something to?
Yeah, I do. I've been kind of looking like they've been looking, and I'm just seeing the numbers a little different. So, in theory, in this conversation, we've eliminated the $2,600 stipend, and it's been substituted by $1,250 that would have to be added to reserve wages. If we then took that reserved wages and eliminated the extra 1,000 there and the extra 1,000 for special time, knowing that the chief is probably going to still be budgeting most of his week's work around the 33 hours, then that 7 hours gives him this flexibility for going for training over the course of the year. 40 hours comes out of that for the different officers. And if you have to do something a little special this summer for Main Street or something, I'm wondering if that would give the flexibility to not exceed the budget, still have enough to cover, and have these little peaks that you have to attend to for either training or coverage, and yet do something with the monetary side of it that I believe the Finance Committee is looking at.
My suggestion would be this: instead of trying to micromanage the chief, we've had quite a rich discussion tonight. I think it's been very helpful. I appreciate all the detail you've gone into, because I think that's very helpful to all of us. But I would take this approach now. Instead of trying to get into all the specific details, if we said, in anticipation of what you'd like to do in terms of reserve wages, we don't think that much is necessary. That's the Finance Committee speaking, I believe. Now, my colleagues may take exception to it. But I would say, well, we think the potential savings is $5,800. We would only reduce that by $5,000. And likewise for the police sergeant salary increase, you say it's a $13,000.
$1,350.
$1,300, yeah. We just reduce that by 1,000. So I guess in the main, what I'm suggesting is, why don't we very simply say the finance position at this point is that we would look at this one amount which is called police department expenses, and instead of the $52,185, we would suggest that be reduced by $6,000 to $46,185, which is, compared to this fiscal year, a 16.5% increase in that budget, which the chief, by virtue of his strong chief status and managerial responsibilities, can work within those different accounts to figure out how much training, how many reserve hours, and so on, rather than our trying to prescribe each one of these. But essentially what we're saying is we would like to provide less money so as to ensure that we don't overshoot in terms of more part-time hours.
The 16% you're referring to is last year's annual town meeting appropriation, not the addition of what we added 6 weeks ago.
That's correct.
So you're not adding that into what his actual budget is for this year.
That's right.
However, we probably do need to advise regarding a stipend to set something there.
Well, we-
Partly because there's $1,000 in there, his budget, for investigations. There's $1,000 in there for Fall Festival. It seems to me he's made some provision for these very things that he's gotten supplements this particular fiscal year for.
The 7 hours additional a week
Yeah.
would come out to a full-time person 9 weeks out of the year. 364 hours.
Yeah.
Which, you know, certainly there's enough time in a year to have somebody around. I don't believe we want to fund at 33 hours. I would be willing to catch a train that would fund 37 hours. And I think that might give enough flexibility to keep the type of coverage we have now and give hours to cover some of the peaks that Paulette's talking about and hopefully cover most of the training. Chief, chirp in if you think that would be a reasonable. I mean, if that train was going to leave, could everybody get on it, I guess?
Does that proposal include the two $1,000 extra pieces in there as well, or is that taken out?
No, this is just talking about the hourly rate on 3 hours a week.
Correct. So would you be leaving in the recommended $1,000 coverage to cover for unexpected investigations?
Yes.
As well as there was another 1,000 in there too, right?
Second page.
For the fall festival. So you're recommending 37 hours with the $2,000 piece is still in there.
Yes.
I just want to, that $1,000 with Fall Festival, I just want to make it clear, that covers not only Fall Festival, but it covers some of our other outreach stuff that we do. For example, we help out with the movie nights with the fire department, being able to buy some supplies for things like that. So some of these special events that we do right now, that Diane a lot of times will pay out of her own pocket, we're just trying to get something where we have funds available if we need to purchase posters for the kids at the school for some kind of safety thing. We do the safety day over there every year in May, and we never have anything to hand out to the kids. So we're looking at $1,000, yeah, it's going to cover some manpower, but it's also going to cover our ability to buy some materials for these different events that we do as well, including the National Night Out. I've got my officers and I all to agree to do that on our own time since it's our event, so we will not be billing for hours for that. So we've been, you know, we're willing to do some stuff on our own time, but we're just looking to be able to see these events a little bit. Because, I mean, last year we had 700 people for National Night Out, first time we ever did it, and I think we had a bigger turnout than some towns that are a lot larger than us. So it was a great event. I don't know how many of you were able to make it, but you know, these are the types of things that I was asked to provide when I got here. So.
Ron, what do you?
You know, I look back on where we've come over the last 10 years with our police department, and I don't want to go back there again. We have an operational police department. I think the chief is doing a reasonable job, good job, and I think you have to feed the beast, and I mean that in a good way. Originally, the chief came in with a budget of 160 grand or some number that was way out there. But the coverage is very important. I've sat here a couple meetings when people said, listen, we need more coverage on Main Street, we need this. You know, it's motorcycles are going up and down, and it's been a crazy time. So I would leave the 40 hours in there. It doesn't make a lot of difference, really doesn't. I respect what the finance board is saying. It's their job to say that, but it's our job to work with the police department in the town's interest, and I think they're doing a very good job, and I think we ought to endorse this. I could go along with cutting the corporal rate, but I don't want to see in cutting the stipend, what we talked about, but I don't want to see us, I think these are good recommendations. And I think the 40 hours we should let stand.
Paulette, what's your position?
If we're looking at the 52,185 as a total, and it sounds like the Finance Committee is concerned with some reduction, we know that there's already a reduction of $13.50 between the stipend and the hourly rate. And I think the 37 hours is a halfway point between not increasing it and 7 hours a week. I think that would leave some time for the education and the training, and still have a few hours for other high points in the summer. So I would see the 37 as a middle of the road to get us somewhere between the full proposal and where the Finance Committee would want to go.
But do you support the 40 hours?
At this point, I would support more the 37, yes, 37 than the 40. Just because I think otherwise we're going to be so far apart on
Well, I'm
the
not-
proposal, and I think anything that gets us all to a point that puts us at a place where we're more or less supporting the police department collectively, to me always feels better than to have a big discrepancy.
Now, I put that proposal out there just trying to find out who's gonna,
You're testing our resolve.
I'm testing the
I see
result.
that, I see that. I can
But
see
I
where
do
it is.
want to say that I do not have a problem with this being decided on town meeting floor, and actually, I think it's very important that it be decided on
I
town
think it
meeting.
needs to be discussed, yeah. I agree with you.
Con, I was going to add that the only thing that issue is really the FinCom and the board come at this with two different visions. And I speaking for myself, would be personally comfortable. You know, the question here is, what does the town want, need? Those are two different things for a police force. You answer it from several different perspectives. The chief has authority and knowledge. He can give you an answer. You as a board are going to have eventually a collective viewpoint, hopefully within hours or days. We see it from another angle. But I think the party that really needs to answer this question are the people of Ashfield on town meeting floor. I think it would be very healthy to give them a couple of different visions. I have a sense as to how I think the people are going to act on it, but I agree with you, Tom. It won't hurt to have some conversation on the town meeting floor.
I think it would be healthy.
I think Ted's suggestion was something I could embrace. I think that gets us there, but I don't like this horse trading.
That's fine. And we shouldn't feel that we have that much authority.
And I just had another question for the chief. You know, I don't really know what the chief does for the day per se. So, you know, I guess my question would be, you know, what percentage would you say you're out in the community versus what percentage are you out in the, you know, in the office? I know there's a lot of administrative work to do.
Yeah,
And the second piece to that is you know, to me it looks like you and Corporal Wilder are, you know, a lot of her time is, you know, doubling up on your time. To me, we could get more coverage per se, even though you're just doing administrative work inside the office. If we had you on separate hours, that way there was a police officer in town on duty more hours. I do know you stated earlier that it would be, you know, it's helpful to have her on at certain times with you to do that. So
she, I mean, about, I'm trying to think, about 6 months ago, for about a 4-month period, she did work days over at patrol and she was working evenings. That was not working out for her at her full-time job for reasons I won't get into, but so she went back on evenings over there. So the only time she's available during the day, I mean, is during the day and on her days off. She does work some evening hours on her days off. which basically renders her days off gone. She works a 4 and 2 schedule at her other job. And she does work during the weekend days when I'm not here sometimes, so it's on Saturdays specifically. So, you know, we're trying to stagger the hours as much as we're able to, but within the realm of her full-time job. Both the other officers that are, actually the other 3, they all work full-time jobs during the day as well. So, unless I was to go on nights, which would probably land me in divorce court, you know, it's a little bit problematic right now because of Corporal Wilder's schedule. You know, like I said, there are a lot of things that she does during the day that she needs to be here during the day. Court is probably the most glaring thing. We have to go there a couple days a week to get paperwork. There are some training things. She does do the high-risk offender meetings. She goes to that. She does the domestic violence meetings. Let me see what else. Sex offenders. She registers all the sex offenders. So, you know, we can try and tweak that a little bit to kind of increase the coverage. But, you know, frankly, especially in the wintertime, most times we're meeting, you know, the streets roll up at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon here. So, you know, she'd be up driving by herself.
Except at 3 o'clock in the morning when you get...
Except at 3 o'clock in the morning when people are getting rowdy. But, so, you know, we do try and tweak it. I mean, she's very good. We were getting some complaints on speeding early in the morning, so she'd come in. You know, I don't get here till late, so she's been coming in at, you know, 6 o'clock in the morning sometimes. So, you know, there is a stagger in hours, especially now she's only working 4 or 5 hour shifts. So if she comes in at 6 in the morning and I come in at 8, there's only a 2-hour overlap. So it's not as pronounced as it could be. So we are trying to work that out a little bit to kind of overlap the coverage a little bit.
And then, you know, just going back to that first question, just enlighten me on your schedule.
You know, I don't even know. I have put in a percentage on a 30%. Some days, some weeks it's more. I mean, I was out this afternoon for 3.5 hours, so.
30%.
30% out.
30, okay, and that's about 70% to get the
Yeah,
administrative.
and it varies. I mean, there's some weeks that you can flip-flop that.
Right.
Like I said today, I was out for a long
I'm sure there's a couple weeks at a time where you gotta do the administrative and you can't get out.
Yeah, exactly. Especially this lately because of the budget. The budget's taking up a lot of my time and trying to do some research on that. You know, last year, and I mentioned this, I think, to Tom, was last year I came in very unprepared for the budget. So this year I spent a ton of time doing my homework to try and what I was asking for were facts.
And now we're ripping it apart.
And now you're tearing it apart.
We do that every year.
That's why you guys
That's
make
our
a good
job.
I'll make a motion that the select board put on a warrant, the police department budget that reflects an elimination of the $2,600 sergeant stipend and an additional $1,250 in the reserve wages that would reflect that $1.20 increase for the corporal, and not change anything else.
I'll second it.
Any other discussion?
Yes,
Go ahead.
we need to specify something here in this process for the firearms clerk, if we're going to keep that in the budget, if we're pulling it out somewhere, but if we're going to make that still part of it.
Do you want that part of that budget, or do you want that a separate line item for a firearms clerk? It's just going to be a stipend.
Yeah, and as I had mentioned, it doesn't matter to me where that comes from, as long as, like I said, we got the 1,600 coming in.
Doesn't need to be a long discussion on this. Then I would propose that we additionally reflect a $300 stipend for the firearms clerk.
In the
Now,
police,
is that
in
still
the police
second?
department expense line?
I would
Accept
second your
My
amended motion.
There you go. Any discussion now?
So we're adding 300 into the stipend.
For the stipend. Any other discussion? We took care of it all in one swoop. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. No? Opposed?
I guess I'm back at the discussion. Did you change from where you were with the 37 hours?
No, I didn't change. I left it, I said we'd support the budget, or that we put on the warrant, the budget, as it stands, changing, it would reflect the change of taking the 2,600 out for the stipend and putting 1,250 up above to reflect the reserve wages. Then town meeting can discuss the difference between our situation and the finance committee. I get the feeling that the finance committee wasn't going to flinch by us going to 37. So
that's why you're leaving that number, you were addressing it, that's all I wanted to make sure.
If we're going to have a discussion, let's make sure it's worth discussing.
So it's a 1,250 plus the 300.
Plus the 300.
And the 40 hours a week.
No, that's not part of the motion.
Okay.
It's what is
The budget.
the budget that he's got in there, and we're just swapping that around. So it's actually a reduction of $950.
So it's
And
kind
our
of,
contrasting number will be 46,185.
and I get the select board number is 50,835. No.
51,135.
Yeah, 50, let's see, 52,185 minus the
to what?
2,600?
Minus 2,600.
Minus 2,600
Plus
plus 1,250 plus 300.
Oh, plus 300, sorry. I'm
Which gives it what?
voting nay.
51,135.
I was liking
51.
better to have something other than 40. 37 maybe was an optimum. I was looking, refiguring at 38 to make some change in there. But you proposed the 40.
I propose the 40. And that's the reason. I think it's good to have the discussion. So Carter and Kohler, aye. Carter, spell it correctly. No. And that's what we'll have. So you've got those notes put on the warrant. All right, Chief.
Can you indulge me for 1 more minute? Okay.
Yeah, well, that's all right. I was going to indulge you for 3 minutes, so go ahead, you first.
Just wanted to let everybody know, and if I could get it on the record, we're doing another one of those drug take-back days. You get asked about this all the time. It's on April 27th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., which is a Saturday.
Are you going to put
That's
that
anybody has
in
their prescription bottles and they...
What date? That's going to be in May?
No, April 27th.
Is that here?
It's here. Yeah.
It was in the paper today.
Oh, it was, thank you.
And this will be the last one they'll be doing. from what I
April
understand.
27th,
From 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. That'd be downstairs. Well, I don't
and
know.
only prescription drugs, right?
Prescription bottles. Yeah, there's certain things that aren't allowed. You can't bring needles,
There's,
ID drugs, or anything like that. You know, chemo drugs.
there's two things that I want you to put in the next 60 days to think about.
Okay.
And you can come back to me or come back to the board. It probably would be nice if you came back to the board.
Should I write this down?
Just think about what you would think of the possibility of regionalizing a police department like we have with the ambulance. Just some thoughts on that and how it would work. And I know it's a difficult thing to ask you, and I want you to kind of divorce yourself from your department and saying that we're building this department, or you know that.
Is this our idea, or has this been talked about? I'm just wondering.
I think we kicked it around
This is one of my ideas.
quite a while ago. And I think it's just something to think about and to, you know, if we should, the pros and cons locally so we can talk about it. The other thing that I'm really anxious for us when we get through this budget process in town meeting is a policy thing with the police department. And maybe it has to do more with our financial situation. We need to, as a town, have some idea of what we're talking about on police cruisers. And I think I threw out the first time you came is if we truly are a 2 police cruiser town, we shouldn't have to be replacing 2 as often as we'd replace 1. So, I mean, in my mind, if we had 1 police cruiser, I would think like every 3 years we'd swap out police cruisers. But if we're a 2 police cruiser town, I'm thinking we might want to replace 1 every 5, possibly 4, depending on the mileage. But I think we need to get some kind of idea so we can budget mileage, budget machines, and that sort of thing. I don't see this I don't believe we've had a discussion and a real plan on how we're gonna do it. When we buy a highway truck, we say, well, we're shooting for 20 years, you know?
Yeah.
When we buy a loader, we're saying we're shooting for 10 years, you know? That sort of thing. So those are things that I really like us to address, but it doesn't necessarily need to be addressed in this budget. So,
Sure.
and you don't have to speak on it beyond that, except I'm asking you to speak about it, or think about it,
Yeah.
so that we can come back and have an honest discussion.
Yeah, I mean, right off the top of my head, I think every 5 would be probably fine, based on the mileage we put on cars. You know, there's a little more wear and tear involved.
Well-
I mean, the mileage we have in this car out here right now, it's been, I think, 8, 9 months. I mean, totally off the top of my head, I do a little more research on it.
Yeah, yeah, so we don't, you know, if we sell you by the 1st of June on that, maybe even after we all recover from our chicken barbecue hangover on Memorial Day, something like that, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming in. I thought we'd get you out quicker than this.
That's fine, and that regional thing, I mean, are you
Do
asking me
think
to
about it.
think about it or
Think-
research it?
No, just take it to whatever degree you might like.
Right, because I know it's been talked about in the eastern part of the state by a couple towns, and they threw it out, but their situation is a little different.
All right,
Okay,
thank you.
thank
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Tom, Tom, sorry,
Yes.
I didn't see you before the meeting to get to tell you that Buzz was hoping.
I'm good. I'm good.
Mr. Chairman, with your
Yes.
indulgence, I think I can report the Finance Committee's recommendations for the bulk of the warrant articles that will be done by 8 o'clock, so he can leave.
No, I'm not to leave, I just,
Please, all right, okay.
I'm good. I'm here until we're done.
Are you sure?
Not me.
Just, we don't want to encumber your big salary.
I'm just wondering for the conversation on town meeting floor about police budget, whether we'll need added police protection.
Between us or between the police force?
So, since Buzz is here, would it be best, would we agree to go right through the warrant and kind of discuss, and then we can talk about,
My impression is that we have enough convergence of views between the Select Board and the Finance Committee that I think I can rather quickly report what we voted on last night. For
okay?
the bulk of the articles, virtually all of which we agreed with the Select Board, save for a few exceptions. And if you'll allow me to go through those quickly, then we can save time for the exceptions. One was the police department, we handled that.
Obviously, you're prepared.
I think so.
Go for it.
Ready? Are you okay, Buzz, on this one?
I'm great.
Article 1, we don't see that as applicable to the Finance Committee. Catch me if I'm wrong on this, Buzz. Article 2, we don't think that's applicable for Finance Committee. Article 3, we don't think that's applicable. Article 4, this is authorizing to borrow money, etc. We recommend that unanimously, 4-0-0. Article 5, we're going to we tabled that one last night because we didn't quite grasp what's at issue, so maybe we should come back to that. Article 6, this has to do with raising, this is the idea of a debt exclusion, and we're going to come back to that one. Article 7, that puzzled us a little bit, we want to come back to that one. Article 8, we recommend this with a revised vocational budget of not 400,000 but 320,000. And we will come back to that and explain that more fully in a moment. But the rest of them we agree with. Article 9, this is the one that we voted against this one by a vote of 3 to 1 to 0. And that's because we reject the late allocation of $14,552 that got added as a result of a school committee vote.
After the public hearing.
14,582, correct?
14,552.
550.
Yes, and we'll come back to that in a minute. Article 10, we recommend unanimously in favor of that, 400. Article 11, we want to come back to that one because we have a couple issues on wages.
Article
Article 11?
I'm sorry.
Reserve fund.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Reserve account.
11
Oh,
was
the reserve
approved
account.
for-
Yeah, we recommend that for Article 11. That's our $3,000 for the finance committee.
Did you have a position on where it comes from?
Free cash is fine.
Free cash.
Yep. Recommend for that unanimously 400. Article 12 we're going to come back to. Article 13, the capital expenditures there, we recommended unanimously in favor of that, 400. Article 14, I think if I'm correct on this, we are going to recommend unanimously against that based strictly on the police department expense line. We would substitute a different number for that.
Okay.
Probably somewhere between $5,000 and $6,000, I would guess.
Yes. Less than what's being offered.
Less than what's on the table.
Yeah.
But we're not going to come back to that tonight because we've already
No.
discussed it.
Right. Okay. Am I correct? Are you okay with that?
Yes, I'm okay.
Article 15, we recommended unanimously for that one, 3-0, 1 abstention. Or not unanimously, 3-0, 1 abstention. Article 16, recommended for it, unanimously 400. Article 17, recommended unanimously for it, 400. Article 18, highway, recommended unanimously for that, 400. Article 19, human services, recommended unanimously for that, 400. Article 20, recommended unanimously for that one, 400. Article 21,
Hold on, Ted.
I'm sorry,
Slow down a little
I'm
bit.
sorry,
20 you recommend in favor.
yes, unanimous, 400. Article 21, unanimously for that, 400. Article 22, sewer expenses, unanimously for that, 400. Article 23, debt expenses, unanimously for that, 400, with the $30,000 town common principal coming from free cash. Article 24, unanimously for that on the revolving accounts, 400. Article 25, we don't understand that yet, that's just a placeholder we see.
Oh, that's out of the new copies that you all have tonight in your folder. I
Is
think.
it?
Yeah.
Well, I'm kind of working off of day old.
Okay, that's fine.
Article 27, is it?
Well,
No,
26.
It's renumbered now. 25 is stabilization, 26 is accept and expend grants, 27 is town authorized select board dispose of. That's all that's there.
Is there no citizen petition?
None came in, there was going to be one, but it hasn't.
Very good. So Article 25, if that's the stabilization, we want to come back to that one in a moment. Article 26, unanimously for that, 400. Article 27, the new one, disposal of equipment, unanimously for that, 400.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes,
On number, Article 20,
yes.
the Medicare FICA is still reflective of the same budget as last year, but if we're changing hourly rates and salaries, and something tells me something has to happen to that to be more than last year.
It'll adjust slightly, that's correct, but our understanding is a number of these expenses are estimates, and, you know, for the dollars and cents involved, I don't think it makes it's an insignificant difference. And some of these expenses don't really cut in for another year after the wage rate changes.
Okay.
Okay?
We figured it'd be less than 1,000. It's probably somewhere between 3 and 800.
Okay.
So if
We
anything,
talked about that.
so if anything, these are higher expenses than we would, you know, get at in a very fussy way, but we're allowing that to ride, and we may have a little excess money in there, that
And
doesn't
I think
bother
if
us.
you go by the expense report, we're not right, we're probably overshot last year.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's some wiggle room in there. Okay, good. Thank you.
Now, if we go back to the front end, I don't know if you, Mary, did you distribute to the select board the revised budget from the finance committee that I gave you this afternoon?
They all have a copy of the revised budget that I've done for tonight, one that you've done for
All right.
tonight, a couple of sheets of yours.
I just want,
And again, you all have a revised one with
okay.
different numbers.
Just to make sure everybody's got the same one. This is one that, if you look at it, it looks like the regular budget worksheet we've been working on, but you'll notice that it's been cleaned up of all comments, save for the far right-hand column, which now says Finance Committee comments. You see that? And the column immediately to the left of that says Finance Committee, and these are the recommendations we have, which will change a couple of the articles in our view. And I think I report accurately on behalf of the Finance Committee, although I would invite any of my colleagues to kind of correct me if I go off the track on this. The first one is that if we look at the Mohawk District operating budget, the proposal that the Select Board has offered up is 1,896,906. And we, I think, in consistency with the letter that we wrote to the school board, take exception to the process that was used to come in at the 11th hour and add another $80,000 to the school budget, of which $14,552 got allocated to Ashfield. So our argument is we think the town ought to vote not for the 1,896 figure, but rather the 1,882 figure, the one we were first given at the public hearing, and the one that we think better reflects a process that we think is a more orderly process. We're concerned on two fronts. One, that the process was a bit flawed toward the end, and that there's also this initiative on the part of people to try to direct specific expenses in the school toward particular teachers and particular programs. We just think that's not a proper way to go about it. So I think as much as anything, we're saying that we think we ought to vote for the smaller amount. The town citizens, I think, will hear us out, I hope, and decide whether we're right or whether the select board number should prevail. But that will change just slightly the column when we add it all up here for the Finance Committee. The more relevant one is the next one, the next item down, which says vocational expenses. We have been carrying about a $400,000 estimate for the appropriation. We now think, on the basis of a more detailed analysis, which I have to credit my colleague David Newell with, that a $320,000 figure there is more nearly the proper number to put there. We think that we've been over budgeting for vocational expenses in recent years, and that's, you know, to good advantage. It's given us a big boost in our free cash the last couple of years, but I think a more telling and accurate analysis would show that should be $320,000. And to that end, I don't know if you've got this. Did you give a copy of this to people as well?
Well, I did email this to the board, I believe.
What is it?
Yeah, just give them one.
Yeah.
This is the recommended vocational tuition and transportation. David Newell did this on April 16th.
Is that the letter to the superintendent, or is that?
No, this is a detailed analysis. Let me give you each copy of these. I'm going to ask David if he can just walk us through it briefly, because it's, I think, quite clear and systematic. This is on both sides. David?
Our vocational advisory committee is met now, as you know, and is now formed, and we're reopening communications, good communications with both the tech schools. We're able to put this together with more information particularly as it relates to transportation, because we now know, we have an idea of what we're looking at for next year, not just for our kids, but for the kids from Plainfield, Charlemont, and Hawley, so we can get a handle on how to bus them in and how many vehicles we'll need and we'll have to pay for. If you go down to the text below the chart, looks like we're heading for up to 6 students, and I'm recommending we budget for 6.5 to cover an unanticipated addition. Tech, right now I would guess 7, but I'm recommending we budget for 8 and add another half full-time equivalent. The tuition rates at Smith are fixed for next year. They're noted here if you turn over the page. I'm pretty confident that's what our tech tuition rate is going to be. There's been some question as to whether it might be 5, and I'm pretty certain it's going to be 4. The sped surcharges are fixed in this. And without getting into lots of gory detail on the transportation, I feel very confident with these numbers here. I anticipate that we will probably do much, much better than these numbers indicate, but I'm suggesting these numbers to be safe. So if you go to the chart, you can see each of these. What I've done is projected fiscal year 13. This is what I believe we will be expending this year. And that's, paying for kids we shouldn't be paying for and paying for busing that we didn't need and all of that jazz. The budget recommendations are here, and it comes down to 313. And I think the Finance Committee wants to round it up to 320. So is there a cushion in here? In my judgment, there's about a $25,000 to $30,000 cushion. So this budget, in my opinion, is a safe, sound, responsible budget.
So,
and I hope we spend well under $300,000 next year, and I think we will.
the implication of this, of course, is that if it is 320, as we're projecting, that we're going to have a bigger difference at the end of the budgeting process that will be to the benefit of the town. And I'll explain more about that in just a moment. We go down through the rest of the numbers. Yeah, I'm sorry.
While we're here,
Yeah.
can we be in agreement on changing that from 400 to 320 on the select board?
I'd like to talk about the discussion going.
Well, then I'll make the motion to change that number to 320 from 400. So we can put it on, somebody will second it, we can discuss it.
I'll second it and get it on the table.
All right.
I guess I was doing some math and haven't completed it at this point, but it's my understanding that if we've calculated incorrectly, I mean, we know where we are today, but if 3 kids move in to town or decide they'd rather go to tech, then that's a considerable chunk of change. And I'm a little more conservative than, today plus 25,000. Because I see it a big enough number that could trigger a special town meeting if we run into issues. So I'd settle on a compromise between where we were and where they are, but with a little more conservative built into it. And I don't have a lot of experience here, so I'm trying to get a sense from you guys as to how often that estimate has changed. If it's unrealistic, at 400, what did we have?
Well, we started with 430.
Right, and then we ended up at 400, right? If that's unrealistic, it should change.
It seems to me one additional student. Let me ask a question. Dave, do you think there's enough money there for one student more to join, or do we need a little more money so that if 2 suddenly showed up, we don't have to do a special town meeting, we've got enough, and, should it be 340 instead of 320 to make sure you can handle 2 kids? 3 and 4 we can never predict, but they sometimes shuffle each year just a little bit, I know, even in September.
As you know, I dealt with this professionally for many years, and Is it possible that a family with triplets moves in, nobody goes down? The numbers can change, but they rarely do.
Okay.
The changes that you're apt to come into usually are kids leaving or moving out, but of course a kid can move in. So what do we have in this budget right now? Well, if a kid moved in, we've got that budgeted. We've got the equivalent of one full-time kid moving in.
Actually, you've got
We also have-
you've got 1.5, don't you? You've got a half at one school and one at the other?
I believe it's a half at both schools. We also have $7,000 by rounding up. And we also have about, in my opinion, $12,000 to $15,000 of cushion in the transportation budget.
How much?
I'd say $12,000 to $15,000 of cushion in the transportation budget. Perhaps more, but I don't want to commit to that. So if 3 students, which would be a net 3 up, 1 moved out, 4 moved in, I think very unlikely, you could probably cover it. But I think the thing we want to do is do we want to budget in the police department for the possibility of a hurricane? You know, and put that up. The question is does it make sense to appropriate more and tax people more on a slim chance? I think the more responsible thing to do is if you run into a 1 in 20 odd situation where we have a problem, then that's why you have special town meetings.
Just to piggyback on David, I don't think he wants to toot his own horn, but he's put together a committee where he's met with several of the other towns and has looked at the busing and has found that there was basically an extra bus running around. They had buses that were half full, and they've now come together and put, they're going to run 2 buses, I believe, starting Monday, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, that's saving a considerable amount on the transportation, and they're not stopping at that point either. So a lot of that savings is coming from transportation savings of just trying to keep from empty buses bouncing around the roads.
I was looking for, like he said, his experience in the past, so that budgeting for 1 extra to suddenly show up in September was accounted for. You can never, I mean, you don't want to budget for all the what ifs.
And we have had more in September than in June, and then at least 1 come in the middle of the year, which I think was the year prior to this one. But I wonder if I could just ask you a question, David, because I know we exchanged an email, and when I talked to Franklin Tech, they were saying 5%. You say they're saying 4 or less. I talked to them about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. I know the business manager there, and I've got my money on 4.
Okay, because when I tried to do it conservatively, based on talking to the bus company, figuring 2 buses only, talking to Smith and to Franklin County, I came, and then building in kind of the same cushion you had, took the same proportions. As you know, I came to 333,500, not necessarily correct at all, especially if you think you got better information, but again, the concern about...
Well, right now, the biggest difference between, I think, our numbers, Mary, is on the transportation, and I think you basically, you know, you're running on these...
I said 2 buses, and you said 1.9, and maybe I didn't understand how...
Well, actually, one for Tech and 0.9 for Smith.
Right.
And again, that's, I think, high. I think for Smith, I think we're going to go lower. We've got children, for example, coming in this year to Smith School from Heath and Charlemont. So, assuming we have 5 riding, which is my best guess, hopefully we'll only be paying 5/8 of a van. And the van costs, the other thing that I should mention is that the numbers you're working with are assuming that the vehicles are going all the way to Tech and all the way to Smith. And what the VOC Advisory Committee plans to do is transfer children at Cummington, Goshen for Smith, and substantially reduce transportation expense. Also, we'd feed into the bus either at Buckland or Shelburne going to Tech, rather than have our van follow a half-empty Tech bus all the way to Turner's Falls. So there's a substantial amount of money that we'd be saving by making those changes that we plan on doing.
Ron?
In your assumption here, I can't keep track of the students. Have you made the assumption that that one person in the letter that you recently wrote is in Buckland, or did you make the assumption that they're in Ashfield? So I'm trying to understand.
That student is now gone, and we all agree that as of late May or late March, that student is gone. So on the FY13 column, I assume that work is basically, she's gone for the last third of the year. Now, we believe that she was gone all year, but we'll see what the superintendent has to say about that.
Trying to understand.
Yeah. For next year, she's not in our numbers.
I think to get to Ron's original question on historically what's happened, you know, there's facts and there's wild ass guesses and there's scientific wild ass guesses, and I think we've been doing that. We haven't put a lot of science on it before. I don't think we've had the manpower, the volunteer work to put in the work that David's done to grind these numbers down. Saying that, what would be the opposition of putting in $340,000? I mean, if we have a little extra money in there, it carries forward. I mean, we're not talking about carrying $100,000 forward. We're talking about maybe carrying an extra $10,000 or $20,000 forward.
If I may just make a recommendation to that guy, I think this is incredible. It is the first time I remember it being so, and I have total confidence in David in this realm, particularly. But another option, we can't do it raise and appropriate, but what we've done in the past is sometimes add a sum not to exceed. You can't really do that with taxation, but you can say, and a sum not to, you could do the $320,000 and a sum not to exceed from some other source. And then if we don't have to tap that source, we don't have to tap that source. So if we wanted to add to another $20,000 or $30,000 to the 320 because of a lack of confidence or because we might get a hurricane, as David said, then you could say a sum not to exceed 30,000 from, I don't know.
I mean, I'm very happy. I'm very happy at 300 with the 320. I think there's a lot of information in it. I think it's a huge drop that maybe, you know, doesn't. I think it might expose us a little bit to some type of risk down the way that we're not right. It wouldn't be the first time that there's a budget line that wasn't absolutely correct. Okay, it's not like the regional, this line is not like the regional school budget, right? Where they can't come back to us for more money. This is our expense, this is our burden. It's really 6 of one, half a dozen of the other to me. If it's 320 or 340, I would have absolute confidence, and it's not like we're gonna send extra money to Franklin Tech or to Smith for, you know, out of the goodness of our heart. It would be just something to carry over that would end up in the general fund the following year. And I appreciate all the work. I'm just throwing that out there for discussion.
Okay, so that's a point of maybe further discussion. One of the things that may or may not help in this is if you allow me to go through to the end point of this proposed alternate budget to show you what the consequences could be of a saving of this magnitude. If we left this at 320, for example, and we go down through the rest of the numbers, and I'm going to skip over the...
So we're going to come back to these, and then we're going to come back to them again, instead of trying to...
Yeah, if you're okay with that.
Okay.
I'm not trying to play games. I'm just thinking. I want to show you what kind of the big picture is, at least in my judgment on this. Going over the few lines that talk about another separate analysis around salary issues or wages here for town hall wages. Those are small numbers in some sense. They're differences that we have as a finance committee compared to what you talked about as a select board, but not huge differences. And I think we need to come back to those. But bear with me for a moment. If you allow us to kind of, for the time being, assume those are somewhat correct numbers, you go down through all the rest of the budget worksheets here, and there are no other changed numbers. So that when you come to the end of the grand total, you'll see that our summation comes out to $4,019,936 versus your sum of $4,115,887. Now that's accepting the modification you made with the police department tonight. But that means that if you go to the final page and you look to the upper right-hand corner, the maximum allowable budget, which is $4,123,162, our finance committee budget, largely on the basis of that $320,000 versus the $400,000 for vocational ed, comes to the $4,019,000 figure. So we have a difference of $103,000, basically excess money, if you like, $103,000. You take the $103,000, and I'm going to argue that if we do the following, if you look at the free cash line just above the middle of the page, that assuming we've got the $342,000 in free cash now, I'm going to suggest that we might use $168,000 in this way. Not $100,000 toward the highway grader, but $135,000, plus the $33,000 that you earlier had in the budget. $3,000 for the reserve fund and $30,000 for the retirement of the town common debt. And if we put $135,000 down in cash from free cash on the highway grader, that leaves $150,000 left to finance, presumably, if we do a debt exclusion. And you could do that over 3 years at $50,000 a year. And having done that, go down to the final box on the lower right-hand corner, and you would have, I think, $200,000 from the balance of the budget, that $103,000 amount, and free cash goes into stabilization. In other words, take the $103,000 and take $96,000 something out of free cash, and that will result in a stabilization account of $416,700 some dollars, and $77,900 some dollars in free cash for combined reserves of almost $495,000, which is 12.3% of the general fund operating revenues. And that puts us, I think, very comfortably and well in this range of, let's say, 5 to 15% reserves you want. That also provides an important hedge against MEMA's failure to reimburse outstanding expenses from Irene's storm damage. We've got a debt outstanding, I believe, of what, $195,000? Or 201 or 205,000, it's one of those numbers.
198, I think.
Was it 198?
198.
Okay. It also accumulates funds for the future capital outlays that we've projected for highway and other equipment in the coming years. So that, in my judgment, may be a responsible way to allocate funds to ensure we've got a good reserve for financial problems we may have in the future. And then my wife, who understands this better than I do, said, why don't you take your $200,000 or so, instead of putting it into stabilization, why don't you pay off your debt that you've taken out to cover the fact that MEMA hasn't yet reimbursed you, so you don't have to pay interest charges for another year or two. That still would leave a pretty substantial stabilization account of $200,000.
My position on that is that we borrowed that at 0.5%.
I know, it's pretty cheap.
And I don't put anything past the state, but to think that if we paid it off, somebody might, that the state may say, well, you don't really need us to reimburse you all that because you can afford to pay it.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, they would look at our stabilization account if it goes up a lot and say, well, you guys got money to pay that. Let's do it. I know, that's a risk, I suppose. Can't forecast that.
I mean, the $1,000 a year for the interest on 200 grand
And may I just say, most of the 98 is still in anticipation, 198 is still in anticipation of reimbursement, not from FEMA, not counting FEMA. So that's not a full.
I feel this is a sound plan. I think moving stabilization up in that range makes a great deal of sense. Also, this would roughly forecast, assuming we'll have another strong free cash position, I'm guessing our, what I'll call contingency to budget ratio is going to be over 10%, possibly as high as 15%. That's good. That's where we want to be in perilous times, particularly with the liabilities that we have here that we're facing. And so I just want to second Ted's presentation where he used the word I, and I think he should have been using the word we. Am I right, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely wouldn't pay off the debt. I want to separate myself from that. But otherwise, I would agree with Billy on this.
This I think is a
So how do we
sound
come up-
overarching
How do we
strategy.
come up with the $80,000 reduction? Where's the other differences in the finance committee to come up with $103,000 difference?
Well, you had a $7,000 difference to begin with. Okay,
Which was,
well, it was in your earlier worksheets there somewhere.
oh, you've got, that's when you're talking about the salaries in the town hall.
Vocation's a big chunk.
Yeah, vocational.
I understand, there's a $103,000 difference and 80,000 of it is that.
Okay.
Is the difference in the change.
Ted, is does 14,000 come from the school committee?
Yeah, I've taken 14,000 out from the school committee.
6,000 from police.
6,000 from, well, 6,000 wasn't in that first calculation for police, but
Several thousands on town hall salaries.
we've taken out some thousands on the town hall salaries.
So 130,000 from free cash to go to the grader.
135. Assuming the price is 285. Now, that's what I was working with. But I say, let's put 135 down in cash.
Out of free cash.
Yep.
And then take 100, take how much to stabilization?
200,000.
How much?
200,000
Into.
from free cash and whatever the difference is that we end up with in the budget.
The difference in what?
Well, maximum allowable budget and what we think we're going to spend. Right? The last page. No, that's it. You've got, at the top of the last page, you've got maximum allowable budget, right? 4.1 million. And you are projecting expenses on the order of nearly all of it, 4.115.
My question is, where are you going to get, you're going to get that money from, you're going to raise and appropriate that money from taxation to get to the $200,000
Yes.
to go into stabilization.
Yeah.
You're going to raise and appropriate to put money into stabilization.
We've done it before.
Yeah.
Was the greater coming from free cash, or was that coming from appropriation?
I'm simply following the format that you earlier had suggested of putting $100,000 in free cash as a down payment for the grader. I'm suggesting you make it a bigger down payment.
$135,000.
Yes. So there's $150,000 left to finance through a debt exclusion override.
A better way might be to take some of that 135,000 from appropriation and less from free cash. So that
for the grader.
You
for
could
the
do that.
grader.
Yeah.
You could
You
do
come
that.
out to the same place. It just makes stabilization so clean. When you want to move money over, just move it from free
Free
cash
cash.
and over, where you could take, raise and appropriate 80,000
Yep.
that you just saved on bulk expenses for the grader, and then 55,000 from free cash, and pay for the grader, and then when you get to stabilization, because it is at the end of the warrant, okay, this is where we are on free cash, and we can just sweep that right over.
That'd be a fine way to do it.
But we need to make a decision. We need to go back to the top and make a decision on where bulk is.
Correct, correct.
So I really don't have a problem with the $320,000 number.
Should we go back to Buzz's idea where we could say not to go over?
Not if we can make it neater and cleaner than that.
I think you can make it work at 320. I have confidence in this.
And the rest of the finance committee's been mesmerized enough by David. So
We-
they take-
Yeah.
We have bought into this lock, stock, and barrel.
And it's a budget.
I know.
It's
I
a
know,
budget.
it's conceivable.
We don't have to come back in next February and be embarrassed about,
No, to Ron's point, things may develop in the course of the year, which we would have to admit we didn't anticipate. We didn't, we missed something by chance, and we have to come back and ask for more money for VOCAD. That's entirely possible, that's true. But we think we've got a pretty sound projection.
With a $25,000 to $30,000 cushion.
Yeah.
Paulette, what do you,
I'm okay with
you're okay, Tony?
Yeah, Dave's explained, but he was.
Ron, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay. All right, so we'll change that to 320. Do we need to have a vote on that, or we're gonna vote on the whole budget when we sign the warrant, right? So, I don't think we have to pick that apart. All right, so 320. So look at that, that took care of, what article number was that? Article 8. So we're good with that. What's Article 7? You're talking about Historical Commission. We got two different things going on.
Correct.
Article 7, we got Historical Commission, and then we got the history. There's actually a line on your budget sheet that says,
Historical Commission.
there's Historical Commission, and then the $2,000 really has to do with the letter,
History project.
the History Project Fund, the Town History Fund. And that's the publication of the next 50-year edition of the,
Because we weren't clear that there was sufficient justification in that letter we received as to why this $2,000 needed at this point. There, first of all, is a $13,000 balance they refer to, and it's not clear when they're going to publish.
so I don't think everybody got a copy of this?
That would be a different line item, wouldn't it be? Because it's
That's
not the
under-
history, it's not the historical commission. It's-
No, it's
No, it's
town
Article
history.
15, I put in history project because we have historical commission.
It says- It says Town History Fund.
Where's it in the budget? It would be a
Under
separate line.
cultural and recreational, you have to decide which. Cultural and
No, I understand that. But if it's not the historical commission, oh, there it is. Thank you. Sorry.
Town History
My bad.
Fund.
Thank you.
I didn't see on the warrant, I haven't voted. Yeah, right.
No, I just wasn't finding the line.
That's mine. David, this is the one there.
Okay.
I think we only had 1 year where we voted $500.
Well,
So give them some fee money, and they do have $13,000.
correct. And the Historical Commission, I'm not sure why that was put in as a-
The Historical Commission is to give them some seed money to prepare for our
Correct.
250th parade,
Correct.
or celebration.
Correct, and that was the first presentation made on February 13th or something like that by Steve Bridges. So we've heard that out. In retrospect, we're kind of asking what that's going to be for, but I think on balance, that was part of the budgeting process, and that seems to be perfectly captured in Article 7, although I don't know why we need 2/3 vote required. Is there something
I was
special?
going by a cheat sheet from Mass General Law. Chapter 40, Section 5, 27, 27A, what I was saying to Buzz today. It says 2/3 for celebration of town settlement. This is incorporation. Maybe it's not necessary, but when we mentioned it last week, you thought that maybe you wanted it to stand alone anyway because it would alert people to getting involved in that project starting now.
I think that would be wise to talk about, that we're preparing, that's,
Fair
instead
enough.
of having it mixed in with everything else.
All right. Are we as a finance committee agree with this thing?
I move that the finance committee approve Article 7.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We recommend for Article 7, 3, 0, 0, unanimous.
So,
I'm sorry, I missed that. What is it?
300.
For Article 7?
For Article 7.
so we don't have an article in here for this 2000,
No, it just came
for
in.
the history fund.
No, there's
No,
not.
it just came in, so I didn't.
It's in the budget worksheet, but it's not in the warrant.
It's not in the budget.
Well, actually, isn't there Article 15, there's a line for it, but the money isn't.
Right, because we haven't discussed it yet, so there's a line there, and
Oh, okay.
I think there's a line in the budget as well.
But we haven't put any money into that.
Now,
So according to this, for the history fund.
so you've got a newer version of the warrant for us? I don't see anything with history project. I see Historical Commission 500.
You don't see Article 15?
I do.
About 5 lines down from,
Just before the total, you don't see.
In the ones I gave you tonight,
Uh,
not the ones you had yesterday, it changes.
Which one is the board's? Good.
So we go to this one. Article 15. I see. History project with a blank. So the question is whether $2,000 is warranted.
Paul, do you have a position on that?
Is there something other than 2,000? I mean, we did 500, or is it, did they have 13? Sorry.
I was just gonna say, I don't quite understand who's in charge of the money, how it's gonna be spent. Is there any?
Well, Don Robinson and Phyllis Kirkpatrick are the editors. They're the ones that have spearheaded getting this published. I mean, they've spent 3 years trying to gather all the information and get this all set. They're trying to be as economical as possible, according to my discussion with Don, is that they figured out that they're not gonna publish 300 of these and then sell them and then go back and try to get some more. It's gonna be a published on demand type thing. And also, it'll be one of those that you can go to, you're gonna have, you'll be able to put it in a disc or a thumb drive. It'll be part of the book that you can go and actually look something up.
And how much are they gonna need in total, and what do they plan on publishing?
They're not exactly sure. I mean, they're still trying to pull it all together. I mean, it'll be a sizable investment. And of course, they're also gonna be, they're gonna be selling, it's not like the town report where a copy's gonna show up on everybody's doorstep or they'll hand them out at the dump. But, there hasn't been any support to speak of from the town besides us making history.
I think our committee, when we met last night, we read the letter, we understood, they made clear they have, I think it was $11,000 or $13,000 on hand, and they would like $2,000, and what kind of befuddled us was, usually when a department or someone comes in, they say, these these are our needs, this is what we plan to do, and this is the money we need. So we were, we said amongst ourselves, how can we recommend or not recommend? We were, we don't have a clue as to what's going on.
Could we offer a smaller sum? I noticed they're paying their bills, telephone, electricity, gas, to help toward that part of their expense?
That's possibly the way to go. I don't know.
Because I don't know what the others would be, but at least, I mean, I think I've seen when we sign the warrants, there are some charges for those kind of utilities, for them to have a place to.
Perhaps the way out of this is for the select board to make a decision and the finance committee may take no action on it. I don't know, that's one idea.
I hate to be redundant, but once again, what could happen is, because we've had these kinds of issues in the past, it's a worthwhile project, but there's not enough information being provided in the request. So you could ask the meeting to authorize the select board to give a sum not to exceed, fill in the blank, upon appropriate showing of,
Contingent upon ABC.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but the meeting is authorizing the select board, not directing the select board.
That might be the way to go.
That's the sort of thing I think we could support. Up to $2,000 upon, further demonstration of need, I guess. I don't know that at this point we can do the spade work to figure out in time for the warrant to go out as to kind of what the dollar amount should be. In some sense, going back to Paulette's comment, you could say $1,000, but they've got $13,000, so I'm sure that handles the mail and all the incidental expenses. Whether the $2,000, $1,000, $3,000 is the right amount, I have no idea. Again, the dollars are not huge. We're not going to break the bank on this, but you want to, I think, be supportive. This is an official town function, is it not? It's not a bunch of private citizens just doing something of interest.
No, it's an appointed.
It's an appointed group.
And that was another question we had. It sounds like this is certainly, within the orbit.
Appointed volunteers, right? They're all.
Who appointed them? Select board?
I believe the select board.
Is this a one-time, or is this going to be year after year?
God, I'm even on that list, Yeah, it's once every 50 or 100 years.
This will be the third history of Ashfield.
But this publication is due, we think, within a year? Or is this a $2,000 down payment on a kind of a long stream of payments they're looking for?
No. This should be done by, I think they had it figured on publication in 14, didn't they?
Well, the
I think so.
bicentennial is 2015, right?
What's that?
The bicentennial is 2015?
250.
Or 250, whatever the number of that is, yeah, bicentennial, yeah, 250. Quadrimillennial or whatever, sesquicentennial or...
So does the warrant article have to be recrafted in some way so as to kind of show that?
I was going to say that maybe it would be best to have it be a standalone if we went with.
Right. It would be to authorize the select board to, pay.
Where are we going to take this money from?
Raise and appropriate.
When we raise and appropriate, it has to be pretty definite, because the assessors can't kind of, sort of raise and appropriate.
No, I understand.
In cash.
What's that?
This would be free cash.
That would be a free cash.
Free cash?
I would think. I think that'd be a free cash.
Yeah.
But you're going to make it a separate freestanding warrant article? Is that the idea?
You would, because you'd have to handle it differently than in a long list of exact appropriations.
So it becomes what, Article 15A perhaps?
Well, we can renumber.
Yeah,
Let's see
make it
if we want
Article
to,
16.
if that's what
Make
you
it
want to
Article
do.
16.
It just has to be clear to the meeting what's being done, it's
Buzz
pretty
is
clear.
aching to do it, so let's do it.
It's going to be a separate article up to $2,000.
To authorize the select board
Right.
to approve a sum from, not to exceed, if they want, whatever number you pick, 2,000.
Are you all right with $2,000?
I'm fine.
Paulette, you all right? And then they'll have to demonstrate some kind of need for us to wink and nod.
And then you'll explain that in your presentation. You'll say they'll have to demonstrate some kind of need before we wink and nod.
It'll be
In
from,
it and a separate article that will give them a chance to get up and really discuss it.
And people want to know about it, I think should know about it.
Yeah.
It's a good project.
and it'll be from free cash.
That'll be in the motion, not the article.
Exactly.
All right.
Actually, you know where we could take that from? Why don't we take it from grant program income?
It's good.
That's a good place to take it from,
It is.
grant program income.
I like that idea.
Even better.
I'm liking it.
You would like us to make a recommendation with regard to supporting that kind of an article if it came to pass? It was actually written down. I'll consult with my colleagues. I accept the motion.
Would you call it grant what?
GPI, grant program income.
What are the contingencies going to be?
I beg your pardon?
You're going to be authorized to,
Use their discretion.
Yeah.
discretionary, okay,
That's what I think.
Yeah.
You'd be investing trust in our select board
okay.
for $2,000
Okay.
for our library.
There goes the shot.
Well, with $22,000 to GPI.
I move that the Finance Committee approve the evolving Article 16 for the History Project as explained to us in the last few minutes, with grant program income being the source.
Well, its source would be free cash.
Grant program.
Yeah.
Look on the last page of your spreadsheet, there's a line there that says GPI.
Never will do it.
So you
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Okay, thank you. We recommend unanimously 300 for that evolving motion.
So Article 6.
Yes.
Can we agree that the proper wording on that should be to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate $80,000 and transfer from free cash in the treasury $55,000.
How much again?
55,
55.
right? Gets you to your 135 number.
Right.
For a total of $135,000 and to borrow up to $200,000.
150.
Yeah, 150,000. Right, it's 230, how much is it?
You're really locking it into that.
Yep. Why do you want more?
Yeah.
Oh, you want it up to 200,000?
Yeah.
Give yourself-
We've got 135 right now. How much do you want total? You want 300,000?
Yeah, I thought we had earlier talked that this should be a deal that could be cooked for $175,000 or $180,000. That this is,
Right.
that is what that equipment.
Right. You're right. I was thinking wrong.
And if you make it $150,000, $50,000 for each of 3 years is a nice replacement strategy for debt exclusion overrides that are coming off the books. That was part of our strategy. So we're not interested in trying to jack up the tax rate on people. But we are interested in trying to make more for reserves.
And if by chance we come up with, David's painting pictures of very lush pastures next year, just because you have a debt exclusion doesn't mean you have to pay it by raising and appropriating. You can pay those off
Yeah.
with available funds.
So did you say, so the article will read appropriate and or transfer 135K, but then the motion will read 80 from appropriation and 55 from free cash?
We're going to read that we're going to raise and appropriate $80,000 and transfer from available funds in the treasury, which is free cash.
Okay, I'm just a little confused, I think, about the article language, which starts with appropriate
Yeah.
and or transfer,
No?
and I'm used to changing that in the motion, but no, you want to,
After, then you put a comma,
right?
then you put $55,000 from available funds, comma, and $150,000 to borrow $150,000. So there's just 3 different sources of income, of money.
But not in the motion, in the article, we do that.
We can do that, yeah. I would think that we're satisfied enough that we can put that right in the article.
and people know what, they're alerted to what's being proposed.
The other thing about this debt exclusion is there's been no publicity about this yet in town. We have to be doubly sure that this gets out in the newspaper and gets promulgated in such a way that people recognize when they come to the election in early May and the town meeting that this is an issue.
And to borrow to.
It's been pointed out to me that nobody knows that this is coming.
Except in our little clip.
Yeah. So we just have to be really sure that gets not only indicated, but I think explained with some background. I think that's always helpful to the citizens to understand this grader, very expensive, but it's to replace one that's very old, that has had a lot of maintenance, that is used for winter roads as well as summer stuff. Even though we have another Army surplus or military surplus grader that helps the summer, this thing is critical with an all-wheel drive, for, you know, all that stuff. Tom Porcello's could write it up.
We've got an Ashfield News that should be out just a few days before town meeting.
Yep.
I would think that deadline's gonna be coming right up on us real soon.
Yep.
Can we also talk about the debt that's coming off, and that as this goes on, it's not a, you know, increase per se in what the current rate has been?
Well, I don't have time, but if somebody can go in and grab Rob and shake him and have him get somebody on this project, I don't even know who writes some of this phase.
Fame Lady is doing it, and she'll probably explain that. I assume we're talking about the debt exclusion.
Right.
Who's gonna offer
And
this?
the budget in general. Maybe I could get together with Faye. Can you find out for me and I can?
Maybe make a press conference just for her.
So the new article, the revised Article 6 is going to read as follows: to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate $80,000 and transfer from available funds the sum of $55,000 for a total of $135,000, and to borrow up to $150,000 for the purpose of purchasing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Is that true? If that's the
I
article,
wouldn't put the total of 135. I mean, it's 80 plus 55 plus.
so don't put the sum of 135 in there?
No, I think that confuses it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Take it out.
Well, I don't know. It talks about you're going to pay 135 out of money that you've got, and you're, instead of borrowing. I don't think it. Somebody can't understand that. They should be sitting over against the wall, not voting.
No, I don't think that's fair.
It does introduce confusion, because there's like too many numbers. And somebody's going to dispute it.
I would do the less numbers limit than do a little
Yeah, I mean,
addition.
it's pretty clear to raise and appropriate $80,000, to transfer $55,000 from available funds, and to borrow up to $150,000. Then you could say the total, for a total of $235 in order to purchase a grader. A grader. There's space, headline.
Greater.
That's fine with me. Is that all right with the board?
Yeah, that's fine.
You said for a total of 235, it's total of 285.
285.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
Good.
The Finance Committee, is there a motion to recommend for that?
That is exactly what you recommended.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
How many times are you going to recommend it? You recommended it last night, and you didn't do what you said.
Three-year
We're gonna do
term?
it again, because we changed it.
Three-year term?
Huh?
Three-year term?
3-year term.
That's the game plan?
We'll make that decision when it comes.
Okay.
If we're going to be in lush pastures, David, we may do it in two. That'll
Maybe
be
do
all
it in
right.
one. Maybe a 6-month note.
Maybe they'll,
No, if you start doing 1 or 2 years, you're gonna jack up the tax rate on that proposition 2.5.
yeah, but you may pay it off if you have a bunch of free cash.
Well, we may want to have a,
You're pigeonholed if you do that.
you know, maybe I need a contingency on the green pastures, so you might want to be thinking of 4.
So, Finance Committee, are we good on Article 12?
Article 12, that's perhaps the next one we should take up.
Well, could I make a comment quickly on Article 9?
Yeah.
Just a statement.
Yeah.
You've heard Ted's report on what the Finance Committee is recommending. I just want to make sure everybody understands that if the town meeting were to follow the Finance Committee recommendation, it's not that the town will have appropriated an amount of money for Mohawk. The vote will be that the town has rejected the budget. So I just want to make sure we're all clear on that. But that the town, that doesn't necessarily mean the budget will be defeated, because it would require action on the part of several other towns. But just so we're clear that...
Okay, one question, so that even if even if it was defeated on the town floor, we would still have to pay the extra $14,000.
Assuming sufficient other member towns approve the budget, we will be compelled to pay.
Okay, so we need to show that in our budget anyways, the $14,000 going out to the
Good point.
I don't believe that the select board has really any option but to put on the warrant what the school committee's asked for. I tend to side with the finance committee on that $80,000. I think that's a very slippery slope, and I don't, you know, it doesn't address that $80,000 isn't being spent to address the needs of all the students through K through 12. It's going to be used to take care of the needs of 35 or 40. So there's an issue of fairness.
But that's only if they so choose. There's no guarantee. I mean, once they get the 80, they can do whatever they want with, or whatever classes.
Well,
There's no control of that.
that wasn't what they voted at that school committee meeting. So
Right,
that
I-
was an appropriate.
But I think they also pointed out that they can't manage that.
They can't.
I mean,
It's a
the superintendent could spend it on anything.
They could spend it on more administrative staff.
Yeah, anything.
Okay.
Any other discussion on that?
Yeah, I think it's worth just saying that it's going to be a hot topic, and I think it was mismanaged, I really do. I think that earmarking something that's within the superintendent's prerogative is wrong and incorrect, but from a purely democratic process, that was the school committee that voted on that. And what I have a problem with is getting into school committee's business, another duly elected board, and here we are jumping into their business. And I have an issue. It doesn't have anything to do with 14 people coming on the floor. It was a democratic process. It was a vote. They decided to take an action. Now, you're going to have maybe one school committee member voting for, having confessed voted for it, and the other opposed, and I'm wondering how constructive that's going to be on the town meeting floor. It'll happen, and but it's interesting.
Well, to your point, staying on the theme of democracy, if our town and let's say 3 other towns by chance voted against that proposed budget, the school budget would be defeated. And they either can come back with the same or one reduced. And they might, on the basis of that, conclude, well, we didn't decide at the time that we were going to rescind our vote, but enough towns have kind of bridled at this, that they might say, I think we're going to have to bow to the towns in their purse strings and say, we're not going to be doing that. It's yet another step in the democratic process. I don't quite see it as interfering with the school committee's prerogatives.
It's our obligation as a town meeting and our various boards that recommend to the town meeting, we have to act on the school budget. The town meeting has to act. It has to make a decision. But my primary concern with this budget lays not so much in the restriction of the funds or special purposes, but that by law and by local agreement, or regional agreement, it's a 3-step process. Step 1, the school committee adopts a budget. And the second step is the school committee presents that budget to the towns at a public hearing, which we attended. And following that public hearing, the school committee then approves the budget. The next step, of course, is out to town meeting for approval. It was unprecedented outside of the legislative intent of the regional agreement, and it's never been done before. They took a budget that had gone to a public hearing and then ramped it up. That's bad precedent. That's not what the voters understood the budget process to be when they created and approved this regional school district. It's bad business, and that's, I think, a primary reason why the Finance Committee is dissenting. It's going to be sending, I rather doubt that our recommendation is going to carry the floor. I very much doubt it. But it hopefully will send a cannon shot across the bow of the Good Ship Mohawk region. And that's
Forgive
what
my
I,
ignorance, but was there some exigent circumstance that caused them to ratchet it up after the hearings?
Yes, a bunch of parents went in
and students.
on the 11th hour after they had the hearing when they were going to approve it and said, you're cutting out French and peer leadership, and that's $80,000. We want that back in, and the school committee.
And mighty effective presentation on the part of some students and staff members, which was, and they basically flipped a sufficient number of school committee members where the administration no longer had control of the process, and the school committee revolted a little bit.
I really can't believe that the budget as presented won't pass in Ashfield, but I think the discussion is. All right, Article 12.
May I just go back for a second? I'm going to add the 80K to the budget worksheet of their highway capital grader capital accounts. Is that
Right.
Just before we pass on, I would prefer that our current Article 7 in the amended, the most recent one, which is the $500 to the Historical Commission. Could we do that after this? Every year I have to work with Michael because he's got other town meetings to go to. So it'd be nice if we got him in sooner. So if we could just move that Article 7 down maybe below the ambulance service, before the reserve account.
What, put school up high?
Yeah, just to click school up 15 minutes sooner so he can make it from town meeting.
So bring Article 8 to where? Where do you want that?
No,
No, I want Article 7 to move down, Article 8 will become the new 7.
That's what I'm saying. Okay.
Yeah.
How about if Article 7 becomes the new 8?
Yeah,
We
that's
have
right.
regional
Article
educational.
No,
Would
you
you rather
want-
keep regional together because he addresses that?
Yeah, I think the two educational
Oh, okay.
ones should
Yeah.
stay together. And I think
So
maybe
7 becomes 9.
we could make 7 9 or make it 10 if you want to do the ambulance service first, but either way, I'm happy. I'd just like
To move him up
to
early.
move up school issues.
Why can't you put the grader beyond that too?
Well, because I think you want to know if you spent that money before you entertain the educational.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking.
That's a good thought.
But the $500 doesn't have to be done then.
Be a lot of discussion about $500.
Well, it'll be a good discussion, but it could wait till after he leaves.
So what we have printed is Article 12.
Yes,
Your issues all have to do with,
they're town hall salaries, and you should have, I think, a separate sheet of analysis. And looking at this briefly, we focused particularly on the assistant municipal clerk and the executive administrator. You see the current hours and the new hours being proposed, the current rate on an hourly basis, and what the select board is proposing. And the proposed increase, as you'll see, for the assistant clerk is $325. The proposed increase for the executive administrator is $239. The Finance Committee, after considerable discussion last night, thinks that, again, those increases are appropriate in the sense of giving direction and trying to make some correction for what we think is kind of underpayment. But we are still concerned about the percentage increase that we think is a bit breathtaking in the context of the rest of the employees getting about 2% increase. For example, the assistant clerk would get a 25% increase in hourly wage. The executive administrator gets a 15% increase in hourly wage. We're suggesting that we have those amounts so that the increase is more like 13% for the assistant municipal clerk and 8% for the executive administrator. You see the per week rates and the per year figures, which of course, if they get taken to the spreadsheet, are a little bit less than what the select board's proposing. And thereby, in summary, what we're saying is that we have agreement on all of the hours being as recommended, 30 hours for each. We're persuaded on that. We do think that the assistant clerk should be left on an hourly basis of pay, wages, but that the two, town clerk and executive administrator, should become salaried positions at 30 hours. And we think the finance committee rate, if as we propose, and the town clerk is not an issue. That's in accord with what you're proposing is a 2% increase for the town clerk. But then you've got three different salary figures. The town clerk is exactly what the select board has proposed, but you'll see that the assistant clerk and the executive administrator have somewhat smaller annual amounts. So that would be our approach to that. And you may choose to stand your ground and leave it as it is, but if you do, we will propose amendments.
And what you really mean by hourly salary is non-exempt for the hourly, and the salary is exempt.
Correct. What? Say it again, one more time.
The hourly is really non-exempt. She's not exempt.
Same.
Non-exempt. And salary is exempt from overtime and additional hours paid. And
Yeah.
because
Same phrase, different phrase for the same thing.
except they mean different things.
I'd like to add that was good discussion on the part of the four of us who were at the meeting, and we spent time looking at comparables and also examining in particular the various rates of pay, salary, wages, and what have you, stipends and so forth for all of the people who receive remuneration from the town of Ashfield. And it is not a pretty picture. It is jumbled and disheveled, and it needs some attention. I think we are all of the opinion that our executive administrator is paid a shockingly low wage rate. So why would we not go whole hog? I think what we urge is not only action on this proposal here, but also to work together and make one of our objectives in the following fiscal year a look-see and continued progress. I think this is going to take several steps, but I agree with Ted, and I know what Tom does as well, that it's a little breathtaking all at once, and I think this needs to be phased. And I think we need to commit ourselves to taking a look at how we're compensating our people, and can we evolve and develop a more orderly plan that's based on, good policy.
So bring me up to speed. I'll ask you to be my thesaurus here. Tell me what the difference is. When I say hourly, I'm figuring people that would get overtime after over 40 hours. That would be a non-exempt employee, right? A salaried employee has a job description and works their job, and they're not eligible for overtime. So you're saying they mean different things. I guess I need to be brought up to date on that.
That would be our understanding in common conversation. The words you're really looking for are non-exempt and exempt. If you were looking, at Massachusetts labor descriptions and all of that. So so no one misconstrues what we mean by that.
Yeah, okay. So it's the same. It is the same thing as what we were discussing.
And sometimes people see the word salary and think that means salaried. And I was just trying to make sure we explain clearly that everybody's got the same understanding.
Yeah, that's maybe a better way to say it, that it's exempt and non-exempt.
And it could be in parentheses after the, if we were looking at a document, just so we all know.
You can You can say exempt and non-exempt, but if you say hourly and salary, probably 90% of the people would understand exactly what you're getting at.
It's the word salary that, without the IUD, that gets the confusion.
A statistical observation, and as Ted mentioned, our committee has no objection to the increase in hours. I think the case was made for that. But, part of that sticker shock comes if someone were to get the calculator out and take a look at the current board proposal, say for the assistant municipal clerk, you're looking at an earnings increase of almost 100%, almost doubling for earnings.
In our
And
discussion,
that has a little shock value to it.
in our discussion, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? Last week, when you were talking about this scheme of cutting it in half, you were saying half this year, half next year with that understanding.
I think we'd be reluctant to just make that kind of commitment at this point. I think it doesn't preclude our thinking of further adjustments in another year, but I think the idea of having this is more just a cleaner way of saying, let's not fuss too much over the percentages, but just take half of what you're proposing, which we still think is a quite an adequate increase and quite a significant increase. That, coupled with the hours, means that the total income to these positions will be going up considerably. And I think rather than just say, this is half of it this year with the implied notion there's another half coming in another year, we're reluctant to do that. We're simply saying that we think in the coming year, we owe it to the town to do more analysis of what the salary and wage structure is here. To see to it
all
that we're
town
not,
employees.
yeah, all town employees. It's conceivable they need more, it's conceivable others need more. Maybe some are topped up in a way that we're a little worried about being really at the top of the range. But I think we're a little hesitant to go full throw before we've done a bit more thorough analysis of this, that's all.
Well, this is very much the same discussion we had before. Is there any change in the select board's opinion on where these numbers should be? I'm real confident in what we have listed under Article 12 in this edition.
I can easily support the Finance Committee and why they're looking at it this way, so that then you look at everybody. Because once you make the bigger change, you don't have anywhere to go. Then the next year, if you're making adjustments, somebody's going to get something very small and somebody's going to get something big. So I could support those changes if we wanted to put them in.
Well, what are you going to support tonight?
I would support the two recommendations the Finance Committee is looking at for that article.
Ron, where are you?
I would say, Mr. Chairman, if you did what you do so well, a little horse trading here, and got a figure a little bit north of this, I would consider that. But short of that, I wouldn't. I'd hold.
Yeah, no, I think we discussed it. We came up with, we got a lot of input. I mean, I know we discussed this for at least 3 meetings, maybe 4. It stretched on and on. Got into a lot of territory about, what needed to be fair and what was, and to have these, especially the salary position, to have it at an adequate level was the discussion we had, so that we weren't cheating somebody by making them salary.
That's a good point.
You're right, and not discriminating against anybody and that sort of thing. So we've put a lot of input into this, and I am very satisfied to stand my ground with this publication.
Okay, then, if I may, so what will happen is there will be a motion and a second by the select board, and then there will be an explanation. When I turn to the Finance Committee, I'd like you to make your motion first before you do and then you'll explain your motion. I'll give you the opportunity to explain your motion in the second to your motion, right? Rather than you arguing and discussing, just like
Motion
your
being
amendment
to
on
amend.
the floor.
Yeah, motion to amend.
Your amendment will be on the floor, and then you'll explain it to people.
After they make the recommendation.
Well, I think they want to make an amendment first, then
We
they'll
were going
explain.
to amend this article to change 2 numbers as follows.
So the first thing we would deal with is the amendment, proposed amendment, and he'll be able to speak to that, or whomever, right?
But don't they say we would
That's
not
different than
support
you've ever
first?
done it before. but
No, it isn't.
I-
I mean, they can say, it isn't, here's what isn't appropriate, and what I've always said before is a really long explanation and then a motion.
No, but
Right.
first don't they say?
So if they want to say we recommend against so much of that as, and then you specifically explain, so we move, that it be amended to this. That's all I'm saying. And that is how we always do it.
That's all right. It normally goes with finance committee recommendation, then discussion of the article, and then if they want to make, their recommendation can say that they recommend a number different, and then the discussion can go to make a motion.
Not if we know beforehand that they're going to make a motion to amend. And we just want the motion to amend and put the discussion on the floor. Because it's a discussion on the amendment. Then we go back to the main motion. That's what I think.
Doesn't make any difference.
If the amendment gets defeated, then you're back to the main motion.
Right. Which
And
you've
the vote
already
is, do you vote
explained.
for this or not?
Which,
We'll have so many recording devices going, at the annual town meeting next year, we'll know how you did it, so then we.
I know how it's going to. I've got a recording device.
Hey, it's your meeting, you're the moderator.
All right, that's how
Our position remains the same. I mean, we've already taken action on this. Now we have to implement our positioning by crafting an amendment. Am I correct?
You don't take a formal vote on this one, we passed it over because we're going to talk about this.
Oh, we haven't formally acted
I
on
don't
it.
think so.
Let me see.
No, no. Nope.
So since I sense a change in the wind here,
No, we didn't.
should we have a motion
Against it, have it as an amendment?
to restate again our position on those
I
salaries?
think it makes sense.
No, full committee, no. We can do that.
Go ahead,
Call the full committee in.
somebody make a motion.
Do we need to circle the wagons?
We're just talking about those three.
Right, just those two salaries, because the town clerk.
Right, town clerk, there's no discussion on that, but let's at least make a motion that we're gonna
Let's do this.
leave those,
Keep it on the table.
executive administrator and assistant clerk line
How much
items
money?
at the levels published today, which is executive administrator at $28,080,
Yeah, I think that. But I don't mind.
and assistant municipal clerk at $24,960.
We've consulted with the oracles, and Tom, we think you need to change your mind.
Ted, you show me the other one. Oh, it's here.
Okay.
Bill,
Can we take one more minute?
Sure. Word session.
I can see that. That's why I didn't want to disturb it. You know, when we start at 6 o'clock, it makes 9:15 feel like 10:15.
Well, I was looking for the reason sheet that had those summed up, because I didn't hear them. Are they there?
Yeah. Executive administrator, 28,080. Assistant municipal clerk, 24,960.
So I'll make a motion that we leave them as they are stated on this
It's at zero.
draft.
You're talking about $4,500.
I'll second that.
Do we want to?
And that there are salary positions, those two positions.
No, the assistant clerk.
Oh, you're right, I take it back. One, the assistant clerk being hourly and the executive administrator be salary in addition to the town clerk.
Right, that's the change.
need to have
And
this
the hours.
discussion before.
Right, to
I
30
think
hours.
the biggest
But the sum of money is what
concern
we
I have
Right.
with the select board
So,
Okay, so I'll second that.
plan is.
Do we have any more discussion? Are you?
Municipal clerk, I think that's getting overly inflated.
I'm not planted in the
And I
air.
think it's taking
Right.
a bad situation
So-
that we have on these wages,
Your position
and it's stirring,
is
it's
to
stirring
change
up
my
I think
position.
taking a half
To
step.
change your position and be a more finance committee.
More
Yes.
study. Makes sense.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
It's
Opposed?
just another dislocation.
Okay. You opposed?
Talk about it, we can do that, that's why we don't.
I'm willing to give thought.
So it's 210.
Yeah. Seems like, I hope we don't have to vote on this again until town meeting floor, because we've voted and talked about this so many times.
Yeah.
We have to remember. We'll have to get a motion or something, and then we'll have to.
But they have.
I don't know what they're doing. Are you in the middle of,
We're on a roll, we're okay.
have you decided that you're going to vote side with Ron and I?
No, no, no. That's good. We haven't lost our bearings.
What happened to Paulette?
What, pardon?
I may not.
She voted with you.
Yeah, she voted with us.
I say we settle it by, there are 6 officials here, and I say we have a vote of the 6 officials.
4-2, we got you.
None of us have been knighted.
None of us are what?
Been knighted. You know, we can't make those big sweeping decisions.
Okay. Where are we?
I think there's none.
Well, for my purposes,
We're done?
to the extent that matters, what I would love to do, and you don't have to, but I would love to walk away with knowing who's moving what. We don't have to do that.
There was one other one.
On Article
14, we know what the problem is.
No, but we have a revised number ourselves. We revised our number, so it's number 52,185.
Right. But we've already.
But I have a question, because it seems to me that in order to talk about that police department, we've got all these sub-accounts, but aren't we, I want to say, restricted from getting into that level, or then you vote them in at that level, and then you can't manage it at a higher level of the police department? I mean,
All we get to vote on is the 52,185 or some other number. Within that amount, I understand that as a manager of a department, the police chief, like Tom Poisson, can then work with among those accounts. He's given us a general profile of what he expects to do. We've given him a lot of views of what we think should and shouldn't be done, but at the end of the day, he could put it all into ammunition.
exactly. But
Which
in
might
order
be a
to
good
talk-
idea, I don't know.
In order to talk about reducing it, it's just a number as opposed to reducing it because we want to take some money
Right.
out of this sub-account,
Right.
correct?
Right.
That's,
That was
yeah.
the discussion.
Right.
But we already agreed on that number, so there really isn't any more discussion on 14.
But didn't we come up
Should
with
we
a
put a
new number
number
for
in
there?
there?
Well,
You
It's
put it,
51,135.
There we go.
51,135.
No, I had 51,235. Is that not correct? I had 52,185 minus, you mentioned 950?
1050.
12.
Oh, okay.
51,135.
I think so.
And you also passed over the Article
5.
4. No, not 4.
Yeah, 5.
5, yeah.
5.
Oh, yes. We didn't have one.
Yep.
Yes, what's that about?
That's probably relatively new to everybody here. The Ashfield wastewater treatment plant asked that it be put on. And I wonder, Brian, since we've both been at those meetings, would you like to address it? And since you're Green Community Committee?
HCOG and an energy company, Nextamp, I think it is.
Next to
I think they approached the town or the wastewater treatment plant with a opportunity to take advantage of a, what's the name, the credits, what do they call the credits?
the net metering credits or the solar facility credits? Net metering?
Renewable energy credits, it's some type of energy credit.
Renewable energy.
Renewable energy credit. The concept is that the energy company builds a renewable energy facility, in this case a solar PV plant, and they then, if they meet certain criteria, they are able to sell credits to other municipalities at whatever price they want. And then the municipality can use that credit to pay their electric bill. They apply that credit to, in our case, Western Mass Electric. They are offering to sell those credits to us at least a 21% discount. So we would pay $79 for something that's worth $100 when we turn it over to Western Mass to pay our electric bill. So there's a partnership between HCOG and NextAmp to do this. HCOG, I think, was the one that initially approached the wastewater treatment plant. They're interested in wastewater treatment plant because they're by far the largest electric user in town. They use nearly twice as much as all the other town accounts combined in electricity. So they came a month or so ago and presented this and didn't have a number.
Sorry, this day?
HCOG?
It was just an HCOG representative that came initially last night.
HCOG is Hampshire?
Hampshire Council of Governments. Right. They're the ones that we contract all the town accounts are contracted with them for electricity. We get a bulk discount on electricity from them. So they came back with a representative from NextAmp last night and presented again and answered a number of questions they couldn't answer before. The most important thing we learned last night is that they are offering us an additional benefit. That is that the energy company that produces or installs creates one of these facilities has to have the meter that it is hooked up to hosted by a municipality in order for it to qualify for this energy credit swapping scheme that they do. And so as they put these in, they look for smaller towns to be the host for a particular facility. So they're offering Ashfield the opportunity to host a facility. They're in the process of putting in place in Hadley, a 2.5 megawatt PV facility in Hadley that they hope to have online by this fall. And in order to entice us to do that they suggested that they might offer us more than a 21% discount. And additionally, these credits, we have to sign a 20-year contract. That's the town warrant issue. We have to sign we have to make a 20-year commitment to NextAmp to buy these credits, and we sign up to buy a fixed amount of credits per year. And these credits then, if we buy too many of them, or our electricity use decreases by a significant amount so that we're not using all the credits we're buying, we're kind of stuck with them. If we agree to host this place, they're offering that we would still sign up for a fixed amount, but if we didn't use all of those, they would take what we didn't use back as an added benefit to hosting the.
So they reduce the risk of it.
Right.
Considerably.
Right. But they are the ones that decide how much, the upper limit on how many we can buy, but they look at our recent historical use of electricity, and they suggest that they normally set it at about 80% of what our recent use has been. So that's a little bit out of our.
This is all municipal electricity?
They were primarily initially interested in just the wastewater treatment plant because of their large use, but we asked them about the other accounts in town, and they were agreeable to also lumping those in as long as there weren't too many of them. A dozen was kind of the upper limit they suggested.
Do you have any idea what the electrical consumption per year in dollars is for the wastewater treatment plant?
Do you remember what I'd have to go look it up again.
I'd have to look at my notes.
It's I think it's in the order of 20,000.
But the sewer commissioners at last night's meeting, they asked for this to go on the warrant originally because they want to do it whether the town does it or not. And the sewer commissioners at last night's meeting did take a vote to request that the select board support either this article for the purposes of their doing it, or the article for the purposes of the town doing it.
Yeah, I guess the relevant question here is putting the article on a warrant to authorize the select board to make this 20-year commitment at your discretion as we research this further.
Well, that's how it's phrased. By the way, that was beautifully explained. Even I follow you.
Yeah, what I came away with was that if you can't have a large PV facility in Ashfield, at least you get to support one in another community.
Yeah, that's one of the negatives of making this 20-year commitment. It would take away most of the motivation to put in our own town PV facility.
They said that towns are capped at 10 megawatts. Ashfield's entire use is in kilowatts.
Yeah.
If we hosted, we would be credited with using 3 megawatts.
Yeah, that's one of the negatives of signing up for this hosting. That towns or municipalities are capped at a 10 megawatt quota, and we'd be using 2.5 of that, 2.5 megawatts by hosting this 2.5 megawatt facility. But our total electricity use, if we were going to put in a PV facility in the town to supply all our electricity, it would be in the order of 100 to 150 kilowatts. So 2.5 megawatts is kind of, it's not really relevant.
So it might reduce the incentive, but it wouldn't create a situation where it couldn't be done.
So this would authorize us to take a look at it and then decide when it actually got from.
What I meant about it reducing our incentive or removing our incentive to build our own PV facility is because we made a 20-year commitment to essentially buy at least 80% of our electricity from them. So putting in a PV facility to generate electricity, we wouldn't be able to use most of it.
Source.
Yeah, so it kind of undercuts any real motivation to build our own PV facility.
In this article for terms of more than 3 years. Why 3 years?
I don't know, and I tried to look up the law on town signing contracts to see if there was anything about today, and I just didn't get very far to see if there's any limit on number of years. This is language that the sewer commissioner has got from HCOG.
I didn't follow the limit on a town can only put so much PV up. The town.
In order to do, I think it's a limitation on what you can do net metering on, municipal level net metering on.
On the municipal level?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it doesn't affect the individuals of the town?
No.
No.
Not at all.
No, you don't have to tear your.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Brian, a quick question. Why do we even need this? I mean, aren't we authorized to do that anyways? We sign contracts all the time.
The understanding I got from them, and I've done no research on this, I'm just taking what we were told in the meeting, was that the select board isn't able to make more than a 3-year commitment without being authorized by the town. I'm just repeating what I heard at the meeting. I don't know if that's correct.
That makes a lot of sense. Select board members.
One of the issues that occurs to me is that this, if you wanted a recommendation from the finance committee, would suggest that we would understand the financial implications of this, but given this, if you like, the quality of explanation here, this has been very helpful to hear from Brian, but this leaves me vague as to what the consequences could be. So I'd have a hard time recommending this on the face of it. And it's not to gainsay, the wisdom and the diligence of the select board and stuff, but it just feels like this is what, a 20-year contract to enter into, what dimension and what consequence?
I think all this the article does is open the door and inform the town that it is open. I mean, when the nitty-gritty gets in front of the select board, it may not get signed.
I recognize that. But it authorizes you to enter in to these contracts, 20-year contracts.
It authorizes us, but does not direct us.
But town meeting will not have another crack at the ball. It's going to be in the select board's hands. So town meeting kind of needs to know that.
That's why it's going to town meeting.
Well, then I'd again, now that I understand it, I would ask that be moved to after the two-school education. Because this might take some time.
It's more complicated at first sight.
You want to move it?
I mean, does the
I move
select
the
board
finance
want
committee
it on?
prepare a recommendation on Article 5.
Ask to
Aye.
have it on there, that is to minutes, there's a select. Maybe it'll
The
be.
question is worth asking.
I remember, Brian, you said the next biggest user of electrical is the highway department?
Highway department and town hall are pretty close.
Well, if we had to use more electricity to gain extra credits, we could always shut off the propane and put electric baseboard or something.
Well, we are seriously considering changing to heat pumps for the firehouse and possibly the town hall, which will significantly increase
Oh, I was
electrical use.
thinking the highway garage, you know.
Oh,
Heat the big garage.
yeah,
That would make
You
the,
get to use a lot of
that would make the meter spin.
yep.
But they're limited, if what you're saying, they're limited at 80% of the last 5 years or something, right?
Yeah, last year or so, I think they weren't going back very far.
Somewhere after the school.
Yeah, I was just trying to figure that out.
Well, we've got
So
some
does,
math.
does,
I think some of the math.
does 8 actually become 6?
I think that
6
8 should
becomes
become,
5?
I think that,
Let me just move it to after the school.
Well, after the school was gonna be the old number 7.
Yeah, but the rest doesn't, I mean, you know, unless you want it after all the long
No, no,
omnibus
No.
ones, then I'll just move it. I'll move up and down.
we're trying to get, what, 6, 8, and 9 further up, is my understanding.
what on this says is currently 6, yeah, you're right, 6, 8, and 9. We move those up, so we'll move 5 below the current 9, so
And 5 and 7 moved down.
But we're gonna leave the greater
5 and
above,
7
so.
down. Yeah, leave the greater up.
So the only other thing I want to confirm is Article, what we have printed here is Article 25, stabilization, that number would change from 150 to 200,000.
I think that's a safe bet at this point. We got to do the math, I think, and shake out what all those numbers mean one more time. But yes.
Well, you saved 80 on Volk and you spent it on the grader. So the numbers don't shake out any different.
All right, 200,000.
They don't shake out any different.
Move, we recommend 200 on that article.
200 on stabilization.
Is that all that?
Article 25.
You good with that?
That works for me?
That's where we were headed. Ron, you all right with that?
I'm fine.
Okay.
And then motions, Buzz said he just wanted to know who did the motion.
No, we can't do that tonight.
Well, we can keep it.
Okay,
Yeah, all right, Monday night.
you're gonna try to sign it up
Out
there?
there for you.
We definitely.
Oh, you have to sign it.
We've got you.
But that would be my question, is did
No.
she go walk around?
The motion you're talking about relates to this.
Yeah, and it's just who will make the motion.
To make
I'll
us
write
sign
the
it.
motion.
Which one of you is gonna make which one of them?
Ah.
And my presentation, you know.
Okay. So
And then I
that-
write
you
a
said
a sheet with the motion, so we're talking.
Well, actually, we even have an extra week to put that together. But that,
Yeah.
we gotta do it sometime, so we may as well do it Monday, unless we have some.
Where will this
You
leak?
gotta run that out.
You gotta send that 7 back.
The impact on the next year. It's a fact that you're paying, we're paying off $30,000.
You're talking about
The
25,000.
land.
You gotta-
Right, we're gonna see that impact. You said it affects the level.
Because
So,
normally when we take it out of
my
this,
rough now, because I want to have
the levy limit,
this one, we just lost it. And we might lose that budget. It's just gonna be, so will that still work?
but when you, the levy limit, it would take that out, and it frees that up, we're not using that.
One more time.
If we paid it as a raise,
One more question.
that that would deduct $15,000 out of that.
If we-
By taking it
how much
out
do
of
we
free
have
cash,
in
it
cash?
doesn't affect,
I got it.
it doesn't affect the budget.
Great number, so your number.
But the difference was it itself was not a debt exclusion,
It was not.
debt exclusion.
So that's always that's an impact.
Even at like 25,000.
So
Okay.
it's
Do we have enough?
15,000 this year and next year. I mean, that makes that a bit.
Makes it go away.
But we're at the end as far as
So
I'm
if we
concerned.
took another 25.
Now that it's full term on this.
And then we're basically going to 150 when we get done, right? If we do that, 41,000 stabilization for our house.
Oh, yeah, that was gonna take something like 75.
I always one of these.
So that
Whoever tells me that I think.
it makes sense all of a sudden. Yeah, no, I could. Dump it in.
So,
I mean, he's talking about something. He's talking about
I think what we'll do is we'll leave.
I know I don't think it's going to.
so we could change those numbers now.
Withdraw your
Take
second.
that,
I was
take
wrong,
that
section.
300 out of that
Oh,
51, 135.
Right, add it to the general page. Or where does it get added?
Why can't we just add it still on public safety?
That'd be fine, but it's got to come off.
But maybe it's own line item.
Online, outside of the police department.
Nice job, Tom.
So it's firearms.
I think we're
Ron came up with a rather good point that we want to address.
We're adjourned.
Well, we can be adjourned as you like, so, is it their motion, Ron?
I can't recall. I can't recall. I'm not even sure there was a motion.
But do we want to make a motion
Make a
now?
Yes, we do now.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to make the motion that our, what's the official title called?
Firearms clerk.
Firearms
The
clerk.
firearms clerk be given their own line item outside of the police department so that they're on par with the other people in town who receive stipends, like the town hall steward. If it's in the police department, then we don't really have control of that. And that number could go way up or it could disappear. So at first I was in favor of combining with the police department. Now I think it should come under public
We can just make a separate line in public safety.
safety for $300 for
Firearms clerk.
firearms clerk. That's my motion.
And then reduce that 51135 by the 300.
By the 300, so the police department's going to be
It's
reduced. Correct that?
50835.
Second,
Second.
all those, any discussion?
Hey, why don't we,
All those in favor say aye.
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 So you have that, Mary?
Yep.
Police is town is.
I move that the finance committee oppose the motion that the select board just voted on.
I'll second that.
One second.
Sure, second.
All in favor, say aye.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Opposed? No.
Just pull it
I had 535. You have 535?
No,
Sure.
we have 511.
I don't know what the hell they
And then we have to
did.
take 300 off of it, so I think it's 508.
What do we got in
What is it, 508?
No, no.
Shock on Ron's face when I...
Because we get it.
Yeah,
taking it as
Nothing
separate.
We got it. It's gonna be
Mary?
I don't have one.
Mr.
Chairman.
I'll send you copies what I do.
I think that it's really important if we could have some kind of a handout on what currently is Article 5, and we're going to move about the energy credits. If there was some kind of explanatory thing that could sort of inform people enough to we don't want a 2-hour discussion about it because it's so confusing. So there's some simple handout that's being generated to make it more understandable. Can somebody do that?
We'll ask the city.
I mean, listening to you was great, but
Sign it off.
there's a lot of questions.
That'll help you. The sewer commission.
commissioners, so I will pass it.
That's all I ask.
Buzz, I think it's appropriate. Brian is willing, that's the whole question. Was someone on this committee, the board recognizes someone on the floor from that committee, because it's the Green Communities Committee. you
I
know?
think they'll make the motion and they'll make an explanation, but if there was a handout that made it more easy to understand, because that conversation, I get it, it's an hour, it's a loose, bunch of loose information. So it'd be nice if somebody could, like, 2 paragraphs, definitions, or something to just sort of inform the discussion.
I like to hedge my bets.
I can work with the sewer commissioners to put something together.
Saturday's
He
Eve.
asked me about
Some
that,
hints.
I said,
Then-
you've got plenty of time anyway.
It's really not the green committee, it's the sewer commissions.
14 days.
So, I mean, I'll just ask
So
Betty,
so
and
even if
then
we had to do
if
something.
you do it, or if you and Betty do it,
For different reasons,
I'll
we don't have to sit here. and
I'll get it ahead of time,
If
so
there's
it'll
no
go in the
action
packet
for
of
that,
things that people
we can't be
can
here
pick up.
tomorrow.
Give me some idea of time frame
Sit there and I would be
for
sitting.
when you need it.
The night before, I don't know.
Right before town meeting?
Mary?
Excuse me.
Yeah, sorry. I feel like we're disorderly here.
Well, gentlemen,
We are, I'd like to,
Brian.
there's just a couple more things as moderator, I'd like
Go ahead,
to,
go ahead.
I'd like to know what we're gonna do in terms of ballot question. Somebody's gonna be prepared to explain the ballot question, the process. Do we need a handout? Do we need anything about the grader that's being proposed to inform people to sort of grease the conversation? So the town meeting doesn't take 9 hours. Is Tom going to be prepared to speak to the grader and, you know?
If he had an estimate, like a glossy estimate showing a picture of the thing and breakdown of the
No,
cost.
that'd be expensive, but just some easy, I don't know, it's always, when there's handouts, people don't.
There was the time we bought the highway truck, and Tom prepared a very nice one-page item talking about, you know, the characteristics of the truck, the advantages of having it, in a way that I think really helped make the case for why this truck made sense.
That'd be
I
great.
think nothing more elaborate than that's needed, but a one-pager is quite critical. Likewise, I would suggest that somebody, maybe you, Tom, or the Finance Committee, or somebody, say, an overview of today's meeting will be the following. That we're proposing a number of warrant articles. One significant one will be some reduction in voc ed, for example, or something else like that gives us the kind of latitude we think is necessary to kind of buttress our reserves. You'll see that come toward the end, because we think we've got enough wherewithal to kind of increase stabilization. So people have kind of an overview of what we're getting at.
That's a good idea.
So it's
Well,
not
we've
just
been doing it
article by
every year.
article by article.
That's a really good idea, it's very helpful. We usually do it
There's normally
after
a
we act on the
stand-up.
town reports,
Yeah.
and after we do that, we do an overview of the budget.
At the very front end.
And right front end.
Right, yeah, no, being prepared to do that and having a little handout wouldn't be a big job.
Right. Then we try to put
Why
something
why
out.
don't you and I get together and do that?
All right.
That way we have equal time for opposing points of view.
Yeah, you better depend upon that.
Okay, I'm happy.
You said you had a couple.
If you're happy,
Yeah, something's
we
wrong.
can do it right.
So will you talk to Tom about a handout?
Yes, not a problem.
Well done, everybody.
Thank you, Buzz.
Town reports out?
Not yet, they're at the printer.
Oh, I have from, we're not done, are we?
No, not yet.
We got,
I'm kind of folded up.
we didn't have like liaison reports and stuff, so one of the things I wanted to ask was, we had a liaison meeting and it just occurred to me, Paul Swim gives his time. And he does something guided, you know, it's some crazy thing. And they didn't thank him in the report, in the annual town report. So what I wanted to do is work a letter before the town meeting that the select board would sign, just thanking him for what he's doing. Because if I opened up that report, and you know, you see so-and-so helping the park cleanup day and all these different, people name people in there. He didn't get mentioned. It was an oversight. And I think that's an issue. I mean, he saves us a lot of money.
So should we do it from the select board?
Just a letter.
As opposed to, you're not talking about doing it at the town meeting, you're just
No,
talking
no,
about.
no, no, just a letter,
Something
but getting
for
it out before town meeting so that it doesn't look reactive, it's
You
proactive.
want, you want to
I would work something up for our review next Monday, if that's okay with you.
That's fine.
Okay.
How about if on this warrant, Mary, you and I, we get together Thursday evening or sometime so we can get this printed? Do you guys want to email to you so you can review it before Monday night when we get ready to sign it? Or do you want it printed here so you can come in and pick it up?
Email it to me, please, because then I have time over the weekend to compare to what we wrote here and.
I
Yes,
prefer an email.
fantastic.
Okay, that's fine.
Yes, email, great.
So we can do that? Are we gonna have time between,
Let me
we're
talk
gonna have to make time.
No, let me talk to you.
We'll get that working. We'll try to get it to you for the weekend so we can all review it, so it doesn't turn into,
And if worse comes to worse, I'll look at it at the meeting, of course, but.
No, we'll get it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
all right?
Good
Anything
idea.
else?
Good idea.
What do we got on the agenda for next week?
Did you get my
Do you
email?
need me, Buzz? Do you need anything
No, I'm
else?
wondering if you need me.
No.
Thank you.
I think we're moving
He was
on.
looking for the names of who's
Oh,
been
you
in
was.
list, does he need
Thank
a
you.
copy of that ahead of
To
time?
do what?
No, I'm gonna send it to
He
you.
wanted to know which one was.
We'll figure it out at next week's meeting and I'll send it.
Oh, okay, fine, so he's all set, thank you.
So we've got minutes, we've got,
Did you get the email that I sent you about that by any chance? About the 22nd, the agenda?
no. If I did, I didn't read it.
Take a quick look, just because that would be faster than my working from memory. It was sent last night. It says warrant and agenda for the 22nd, I think.
Anything special for it?
Just possibilities. But some of that was my thinking that we would sign the warrant tonight, which by today I realized didn't happen. So maybe much of what I sent you should be moved to the 29th or something else.
When did Lenny request?
Yesterday.
Yeah. I think the 29th will be fine.
Okay. I told him I'd answer him tonight, so.
The 29th will be fine, we can make sure there's no turn on that. I think we need to concentrate on getting this budget taken care of and get this done without, I think.
Should I take it?
I think Steve Goodgens, you know,
Everything I suggested there can go to the 29th? Are you okay with all of that goes to the 29th?
we should be able to take care of that revised town hall use application, so we get that off our desk.
When, on the 22nd?
Yeah.
This warrant and motion, is that gonna involve Buzz at all? Will he be here on Monday?
He may or may not be, but in any case, I always send him a motions copy that shows who's making the motions and some of the talking points and what the votes are, what's majority, what's 2/3, what's 9/10 if there's something. Which there isn't on this warrant.
If the sewer commissioners want to come in, they can come in on the 29th too. Because Brian brought us up to date, brought me up to date. Much
So I
as-
can tell
Much
them
as
it's
I
up.
want to be up to date.
I'll tell them it's up to them, if they want to come, fine, if they don't, fine.
And then after the 29th, we can start getting back to some of the stuff that's in the file and in the pile.
So for the 22nd, because I'm going to post that agenda tonight or early tomorrow.
We're signing
Just-
warrants too, right?
Yes, we gotta sign the warrant.
So I No more budget talk.
Only as it reflects in the warrant.
And then we'll go over, I don't think this has to go on the agenda, part of signing the warrant will be talking about, we'll make motions and maybe some talking points or something. So, final preparation and signing the warrant.
Liaison reports. That's
And then back to the usual. Okay.
Sound good? Hey, well, maybe the 6 o'clock deal's working, or anybody wants to adjourn? We'll be out here at 10 instead of 11?
That'd be nice.
Huh?
I move
6
we
o'clock
adjourn.
stuff for me.
I'll second Paulette's motion.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.